Hello, young voters. Welcome back to another video. Today we have a debate lined up between myself and Vikaas. Hello, Vikaas.
What's good?
All right. So today we are debating, and I say debating, but I use that term lightly. It's more going to be of a little bit of a conversation between me and Vikaas about how and why the GOP needs to go, got to be destroyed, how and why we're going to do it. So it is my position that the GOP needs to disappear in order to have any form of social progress and a good future. And I have some ideas about how. I have some ideas about. Yeah. I have some ideas about how. So we're going to be talking about that through the course of this debate. We're going to play an aim for about 45 minutes, and I think we're ready. So
Yeah, before we get started, I'm gonna be that pretentious kid who plays devil advocate, and I'm gonna be asking him a question and we pushing back on Nico and seeing how he's responding. And I guess I'm probably gonna push him a little and see how he comes back and responds. So if I act a little annoying, it's not me. I'm just playing devil's advocate. Okay.
yeah, we promise. We promise. Because way cuter in real life. All right, so all right, with that start, I guess I'll go ahead and get into it. So let me explain this. In my opinion, and any way I feel like you can look at it, the GOP is responsible, is the leading force behind climate change now, which is probably one of the greatest threats facing our successful future as the human race. And with the GOP leading the charge against any sort of movement towards lessening the effects of the climate crisis, especially as we just saw, report just came out, we're going to hit 1.5 degrees Celsius, best case scenario, which is terrible. And that's best case scenario. And Republicans are steadfast in leading us down the worst case scenario. So that's my first thing. I think they need to be destroyed because we cannot let them ruin this planet, because that will, ruin humanity's stability, and then will cause a lot of issues. And that rolls into my second point. But because I'll let you.
All right. So my question is, should I go full QAnon for this, or should I be a little bit reasonable?
I mean, just be a reasonable person.
Right.
And I forgot to mention, audience members, if you'd like to ask questions during the debate, if they're good questions, we'll probably address them during as we're talking and incorporate them in. So it's not going to be sort of save your questions for the end. It's going to be you can ask questions throughout, and we'll try and get to them if they're good questions, obviously. So
Put it in the chat though.
put them in the chat. So that's my first point. I think they are the leading factors, or the people in the lead for denying and fighting any attempt at resolving climate change. So that's my first point as to why I think the GOP just can't stay if we're going to have any sort of prosperous future. Second point, this rolls into the climate crisis. I think the GOP are also the leading proponents in creating a government that does not respect democracy, does not respect the rights of all our citizens, and frankly is fascistic. And you see this with more of some would say the more fringe elements of the party, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, the Florida guy, gosh, what's his name again?
DeSantis.
Yeah, DeSantis. The Texas guy, which I'm forgetting the name of, and then obviously Trump. I think it's Abbott. Yeah.
Abbott, yeah.
And then obviously Trump with January 6th. We saw a attempt at taking over the office of the presidency by force, and while it was a terrible attempt, it was an attempt that should not be taken lightly. And I really have come to believe that the GOP is not interested in preserving democracy, and if they had their way, Trump would be the illegitimate president, and proper voting procedure and the rights of all our citizens would be infringed. And I think they don't care about democracy or preserving our institutions, and that they've shown their hand, I believe, by blocking any investigation into January 6th and countrywide passing anti-voting laws that are frankly just making democracy weaker so that Republicans can win more. And I think they've shown their hand. And I think that the United States must be a democracy, in my opinion, in order to be a successful country. I like democracy. I hope everybody in the audience also likes democracy. And I would rather not see it taken over by people who would stop at nothing to gain political power just for the sake of it. Now, I also think, like I said, they're the leading proponents in discrimination and creating a intolerant society, which is bad for everybody. And they are the leading members in creating more fascistic society because, we've seen time and time again Republicans be on the opposite end of any sort of attempt at progress. And I'm sure this is hurtful to some of our viewers that might be Republican, but really, when you look at it throughout history, conservatives and conservatives have been the people standing in the way of progress. Be that the civil rights movement, be that the fights for unionization, stuff like the 40-hour work week and the weekend and childcare, and all these things that we know and love and cherish. And conservatives have stood in opposition to that. They've also stood in opposition to gay rights, trans rights, and rights of people of color. So when I look at the GOP, I see everything standing in the way of creating a better society. And I don't think it's and I'm not when I'm talking about the GOP, I want to clarify. I mean the GOP. I mean the people who are in power, the officials, the people who are deciding policy. I hold no animosity towards the Republican voter. In fact, I'm sure we would have much more in common than either of the people at the top than we have with either of the people at the top of respectful parties. Hopefully that sentence made sense. And I hold no animosity towards the Republican voter, and not really even towards specific politicians, although I could name a few. It's more of the whole system and philosophy. And some select Republican politicians, I'll say. The ones I name, I suppose.
So can I state my counterpoints now?
Sure.
So firstly,
or actually, let me finish my opening statement. So, and then the third main point, is I believe that the Republican Party. Oh no, I did actually cover it. I said they're staying in the way of progress and an inclusionary society and stuff like that. So yeah, I said so they're anti-democratic. They're opposing any attempt at stopping climate change, and they're creating a worse world, be that through practices that encourage discrimination or fascism, which are both bad things, and we can all universally agree on that, I think.
So
that's my opening statement.
So my first point would be in terms of climate change. So how do you know the Republicans are actively against climate change, and why do you think that their method of putting the economy above climate change is necessarily wrong? Because the Republican, what they would say is, oh, we don't believe climate change is fake or anything. We just believe that it's not as important as preserving the economy. So what's your argument to that?
So great question, Vikaas. My response would be twofold. One, worrying about climate change is worrying about the economy. An event in which significant chunks of land, including many of our most populous coastal cities, are wiped out by rising tides, is not a situation anybody wants to be in, and that would destroy our economy to be losing all these cities and stuff like that. Also, the increase in natural disasters has already shown us how it's already been showing us how costly it is. With all these hurricanes that have been happening recently, these wildfires ravaging not only our nation, but nations across the world, that have caused millions and millions, if not billions of dollars in damages. And we continue to see all these events popping up that do cause economic impact and harm. So not only those two things, but also we're going to see things like crop failure and species die off, which is going to make the cost of food rise. That's going to be more expensive, and farming techniques are also going to become more expensive, and we're going to see even starvation. And when you have starving people, they're not super excited to buy and work. So all the factors of climate change, everything that climate change is going to lead to massive economic harm. So if you truly want to save money, you would tackle climate change as early as possible, because it's much cheaper to do it now than it is to do it when it becomes I wouldn't say an issue, since it's already an issue, but
I have a clarifying question.
if you have any questions, just put them in the chat, please. Thank you. So I think I lost my train of thought there, but that's how I'd say you save money now, by tackling climate change. Just put your questions in the chat, please. Thank you.
All right. So now, second point is, you said the GOP is anti-democratic, and I do agree. Individuals like Trump or Taylor Greene, they're pretty bad. But how can you say we should take away the whole party just because of the influence of a few bad actors? And why shouldn't we encourage some more upstanding politicians in the GOP rather than completely just obliterating it?
Awesome. So yes. Okay, Phil, why don't you go ahead and state your clarification, and I'll give you a couple seconds. Otherwise, I'll move on to my answer to Vikaas. Okay, I'll give you a couple more seconds, and I'll start to answer Vikaas. I think that, yes, while there are a lot of members of the GOP that I would say have been acting respectfully, including it was a blonde lady, I forget her name. She said we should be doing the January 6th investigations, and we should be doing that. And she came out and stood out against the GOP, and she got super dunked on by the most far-right elements of the Republican base. So there are some people that are trying to stand up and maintain that the Republican Party maintain actual values. And here's another thing: I don't actually believe, I've come to believe that the Republican Party doesn't really stand for what they used to say they stood for. At this point, they stand only for culture war issues, because they don't stand for any sort of small government, because they keep passing every time they're in power. Every time they have been in power recently, they have increased government control and increased government spending. So I don't think they stand for that. And I don't really think they stand for any noble goal at this point. I think they just stand for cultural issues and enriching the already rich. So sorry about that little tangent there.
So yeah, no, next question.
But, well, I can respond to your question.
So yeah,
I'm getting there. Okay. So sorry about that. The chat's just reading the chat.
All right. So yeah.
So there are GOP operatives that I think have some good intentions still. However, the party has clearly shown that they're not willing to advance that position, and they had the perfect opportunity after January 6th. They could have said, you know what, we're done. We're going to stand for principle. We're going to stand for democracy. And they could have impeached Trump. They could have started to kick out the people in power. They could have started to kick out the people who aided and abetted in the insurrection. And they had the perfect golden shoot. And in fact, on the January 6th, I very clearly remember so many Republicans coming out and saying, this is what Trump did. This is not us. This is not what the Republican Party stands for. And I would like to see those responsible arrested. And they came out and said that on that day, but it turns out they were lying, and they didn't stand by their principles, and they threw it all away because they knew that, or they thought that it would be better politically to sacrifice democracy for their own careers. And the Republican Party has, and the whole voting structures and how the voting base is going, has incentivized people going more and more towards the right. And Republicans who are quote unquote moderate are seeing competition from Republican candidates farther to the right of them. They're seeing competition in primaries. And as Trump, and who is the main instigator, I would say, as the leader of the Republican Party, is pulling his party towards more the right. He's riling up his voting base, and it's making it impossible for these so-called moderate Republicans to succeed. So I would say if you're in the Republican Party as a politician, I mean, and you don't like the way it's going, then join the Democrats. If you wanna stand for what you think you stand for, and everybody left, frankly, I don't think is advancing positive goals, and I don't think the Republican Party is savable in any way.
All right, yeah. So next question is, how can you say that the Republican Party is discriminatory when they've led to contributions such as lowering minority unemployment rates and also donating money to HBCUs and black-owned businesses?
Sure. So every presidential administration has been the most progressive presidential administration in history, and I'm talking about recent history. I wouldn't say for every administration because there were always caveats. But Bush was more progressive, and then Obama was more progressive, and then Trump was more progressive, believe it or not, and now Biden is going to be more progressive. It always becomes more progressive. Obama started out not supporting gay marriage, and then he ended his presidency supporting gay marriage. Trump went in already supporting gay marriage, okay? But Trump didn't go in supporting trans people. And now Biden is going in and now he's supporting trans people. So you see incrementally administrations becoming more and more progressive. But I don't think that's because of the political philosophies of those administrations, at least not when it comes to Republicans and probably not when it comes to Democrats, but that it's simply the will of the people and the general public opinion to be more progressive. And as time moves on, in general, when progressive forces are, active and campaigning, they are able to move the general political sphere and discussion towards the left, towards the more progressive portions. And that's another example of, the progressives always being on the right side of history, and Republicans not so much, unless they're forced to, they're dragged to. So even though you see Republican administrations doing some progressive things, it's not because they want to. And even though they might tell you that they want to, I don't believe it's because they want to, because they could do so much more if they really cared. And they've done so much to damage people of color in their lives and livelihoods too, that I don't think they're really genuine in that. And any progression we do see, I'm grateful for, but I don't really think it's out of the sincerity of their hearts.
Okay, so then my next question is, in previous debates, you said that you believe that you can go in and change the Democratic Party to become more progressive and more economically leftist. So wouldn't someone be able to argue using your own points that you can go in and change the Republican Party using politicians who are still nice and progressive, but still economically right wing, and that they can change the Republican Party to become a socially moderate, progressive, and economic right wing party? Because you believe that Democrat Party can change even when it's
Mhm.
people like Pelosi at the top who are still shilling out to like big corporations. So if you can believe that, why shouldn't someone be able to believe that they can change the Republican Party?
If you're going if you want a party that is fiscally conservative and socially liberal, I would point you to the Democratic Party, because the Republican Party is just the racist party that is also, honestly, they don't really have specific economic goals besides making rich people richer. And that's a lot of what Democrats have too. Um, but it's literally just the Democrats, but a little bit more racist and more flamboyant with the racism. And I'm saying racist, but I also mean like everything else with that. So I don't just mean racism with that. But
So
so I would say that I don't believe it's changeable in the same way that that Democrats are changeable. Mostly because for the Democrats, the correct electoral move is to move left, and the young base wants them to move left. Meanwhile, you have the conservatives where their agitated base is to move right, more towards fascism, and that's the road that they're going on. And anybody who's tried to stop them has gotten absolutely annihilated politically. I mean, Mike Pence, I don't, you can't get more far right than that, really. If you take a second to think about it, at least that's what we would have thought 4 years ago. But now we have people shouting "Hang Mike Pence" outside the halls of Congress because he went through with a process he had no control in over, and certified the votes for Biden.
all right, yeah. So my next question is, you obviously the Democratic Party is currently a right wing neoliberal party. It's already a little socially progressive. Like that's undebatable, right? Like it's already like that. But you
Mhm.
want to change the Democratic Party to become a left-wing economic and left-wing progressive party, then what will
Yep.
happen to those right-wing voters who are socially progressive if we don't change the Republican Party and have them all lumped together with a new emerging Democratic Party?
Mhm. That's a great question, although I think that fits more into the how portion. So I think we have just a little, we still have a little bit of time. I think we have about 8 minutes left of to discuss the why, unless we're completely out of it. But I'd like to discuss the why first, just so that we have a good base to justify some of my thoughts as to how. So,
Yeah, so I'll
do you have
say
any other questions for me, or I can expand on my opening statement?
they go and expand. Like I'm pretty done. I'm done for now.
Okay, sweet. Um, so a couple other things to think about is that like I've said, Republicans I don't think have stood for a whole lot since the rise of the Tea Party, and I think that what they previously believed, small government, individual liberties, is not what they're campaigning on. I mean, they're campaigning on silencing free speech. They're campaigning on reducing the autonomy rights of women, reducing the rights of oppressed peoples, closing off access to the country from people, stricter laws on um, I already said free speech, stricter law, yeah, just oh yeah, more power to the police force when they claim to hate authoritarianism so much, but we literally had people, we had a whole thing about people protesting unjust use of force by the government in the state, and all these, Second Amendment people, all these libertarian people started flying, Blue Lives Matter flags, and I don't have a problem with you supporting the police force. However, it seems a little bit hypocritical for you to talk about authoritarian overreach and then be on the side of supporting having unmarked vans come up in the street and start snatching protesters. So it's that's authoritarian government 101, and for to be advocating for a philosophy supporting that while meanwhile calling yourself a libertarian and you're promoting individual rights and anti big government, I think is hypocritical in my opinion. So I think a lot of what the Republican Party's claim to stand for, when you really take a hard look at it and look at the actual policies that they're passing, not what they're necessarily saying, because they like to lie a lot as politicians do. But when you look at really the laws that they're passing, it doesn't seem like they're holding fast to any of their more noble commitments, and anything that they do either is something that will benefit the rich and corporations, or will do more racism to rile up their small but loud base that really goes for that type of thing.
The
And then,
question.
mhm.
So if the Republican Party's truly racist, then how come support for people like Trump has increased for minorities if like they're truly a more racist faction?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think that has a lot to do with Democratic or the Democratic Party failing to continue its outreach towards minorities and failing to properly value and appreciate the electoral success they've seen among minority groups. Just assuming, like Joe Biden said in an interview, if you ain't voting for Joe Biden, then you ain't black. This is a clear example of the Democratic political operatives saying, you know what, they're just going to vote for us anyways, and we don't need to do any outreach. We don't need to cater to them, and that's why I think you're seeing a lot of, or not a lot of, but you are seeing rising amounts of minorities who, especially immigrants who may be more conservative, coming from a more socially conservative background, even though they're economically liberal or economically left wing. You see these usually older immigrants getting a little confused who to vote for, and some of them are voting for conservatives now because conservatives are doing a better job keeping up the messaging that they're not actually racist, and some voters are unfortunately falling for that.
So what you're trying to say is the reason why the Republican Party is gaining votes is due to the fact that the Democratic Party isn't using their power to do left-wing economic programs, and it's kind of a protest vote.
No, I wouldn't say it's a protest vote. I think it's the conservative rhetoric saying, oh, we're not racist. For example, the thing Candace Owens does is like, oh, Republicans aren't racist. I'm Republican and I'm black. And that's a thing that seems to be effective for a lot of people and is working. Um, and I don't believe the sincerity of her arguments because when you look at the things she advocates for, these are things traditionally advocated for by racists. I mean, that's the clearest line you can see, because the thing about conservative rhetoric is that it doesn't change too much, where you have the same conservatives from the 1950s who are against things like desegregation in schools. Now you have those the people being against CRT in schools, whatever that means. They are basically adopting the same slogans, so you can like directly trace the lineage from racism to a little bit more sanitized and watch racism, a little bit more dog whistly, but it's still the same phrases, and sometimes it's more evident than others. And I just think that the Republicans have been doing a really good job in their messaging, saying they're not actually racist, and the Democrats have not been doing a job properly appreciating and catering to their minority voters, because they just assume that they're going to win that block anyways.
You brought some really good points, Nico. So like, I'm gonna let you finish off.
Sure. So I'm trying to remember what I was saying earlier. There's a here's the thing. There is a conceited effort among the Republican Party to sort of there's an effort to not preserve a lot of governmental institutions, and I talked about this in a video, why Republicans always win. And this is another thing I don't like about them. I wouldn't say it's one of the three main things that I brought up. It is a consideration that as a result of their philosophy of saying, we want small government and less taxes, they will purposely destroy the government. They will purposely, the term is starving the beast among online political circles. That's the term. So basically, they cut funding, they cut and they appoint bad people to keep positions in government institutions, and then wait a couple of years until Democrats are running the show, and then they say, "Oh, look, this government isn't working," because they purposely break it. So and that's another thing that I wouldn't say is part of the big three, but that's another thing to consider, is that Republicans are not good for government because they don't believe in government. They don't believe in a government that can do good. They believe, as sort of the Reagan slogan, the most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you." And they've really taken that to heart, and they've sort of started to try and make that become a reality. And I don't want personally people in government who are intent on destroying said government. I want people who, even if they say, there's flaws with the government and government isn't that efficient and there's bureaucracy and all this stuff, I'm completely fine with them saying that. But when it comes to the point of there's flaws with this government and I'm not going to do anything to fix it, in fact, I'm going to make it worse so that we can get rid of it sooner, that's why I take issue. I think you can have flaws with the government, but trying to take it apart on purpose, I would say that's a dangerous party for the American government and American society, and it's not one that I think has the right to exist.
Two questions based off of that.
And
So
then I have one last point, and we can move on after that.
So yeah, previously you said that like the Republican Party's doing big government, but now you're saying that like they're going and doing the small government thing of removing many agencies by bloodletting, which is like a libertarian practice. So which one would you say they are? Are they like a big government that's like stifling people, or are they like a small government that's like bleeding the beast out?
Well, they're a small government. They're campaigning and running on small government in the sense that, yes, they're cutting funding to these institutions, but these are important institutions that we want and value, like the Postal Service or the CDC,
So you're saying that
which
they're doing
has proved very useful. And they're making it a smaller government that way. However, they're increasing funding towards the military and the cops, and both of these things are for the interest of making more money for the already rich and themselves by, for example, for making more funding to the military so that they can fund the military industrial complex, and being more hawkish, that's so that they fund the military industrial complex, and a lot of them are stock owners, and these defense contractors, or they're taking campaign contributions and stuff like that from these guys. Meanwhile, you have when you're cutting things like funding to the USPS and the CDC and stuff like that, and all these essential services that we rely on that work fairly well until Republicans get in control, in my opinion. When they cut funding to that, for UPS or Amazon, or what's the other postal service? Not Fox. FedEx, yeah, okay, yeah, it was with an F. So those companies start to gain control, and I'm sure there's been some campaign contributions by them in order to get Republicans to start to dismantle their direct government competitors. So I think for both those reasons, it's to enrich themselves and the already rich, and they're just going about it in different ways, either small government or big government.
But couldn't you argue that even if they're cutting off essential agencies, they're still saving the working family tax money so that they can save the money, right? Wouldn't you be able to argue that the Republican Party, even though they're doing some bad in cutting funding for these agencies, they're still helping the individual in terms of them not paying too many taxes?
I mean, cutting taxes to the poor is a short-term economic benefit. However, they haven't cut taxes to the poor. They, I mean, they haven't. When you look at the distributions in Trump's tax cut, about half went to the middle class in the first year, and then the rest of it, and then about 40% went to the rich, and then about 10% went to the poor. There wasn't very much. They didn't receive very much in tax backs. Meanwhile, the middle class received a fair amount, but that's only for a couple of years. Now, in 10 or so years, you're going to see the 1% gain 90%, up to 90% of that tax cut. They're going to gain 90% of those benefits. So really what that was just some little bit of clever political maneuvering, them saying, oh, the middle class taxes and the poor taxes are going to go down. But really, when you look at the data, you see the taxes on the rich go down, which is economically destructive to and as wealth inequality goes up, the economy functions less well. So
Is this your final point, or
no, my final point was COVID, and now I wouldn't say this is part of my three things. If COVID has taught us anything, Republicans literally took the side of COVID against the American people. Why? Because they thought it would benefit them electorally. Spoiler, it did not. And there is a sort of common pattern. I think I mentioned before, something Republicans did that they thought would benefit them electorally that did a lot of harm and didn't even actually end up happening. But their treatment of COVID really showed us how much they cared about the American people. The fact that they were willing to let thousands upon thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, die as a direct consequence of their rhetoric is bone chilling. And I don't think a party that literally campaigned on more people dying from COVID should have the right to stay in power. And I don't think they are responsible people with the best interests of the American people at heart. I mean, it took so long for them to start telling people to go get the vaccine. I mean, only recently has DeSantis said go get the vaccine, because Florida is responsible for 20% of the nation's COVID cases right now, and they make up like 9% of the population. It's insane how much they are dealing with COVID. I mean, when you look at Republican states, man, they're lower population, but when you look at the per capita deaths, when you look at the per capita cases, they're getting so much more. And I really think it's because of the conservative rhetoric around the dismissal of COVID, that the dismissal of the effectiveness of vaccines, and things like that is I think the reason why it happened. And if you take that to be true, which I think you should, I haven't seen a convincing argument and on the to show me the opposite, that Republicans were the ones leading the charge against COVID. But I would say that a party who has led so many people to death, like literally death. If you just want to take one example, Herman Cain, who they had him talk about how COVID is fake and it's just the flu and blah, blah, blah. And he went to a Trump rally to see Trump and to hear Trump talk about how COVID is not a big deal. He caught COVID and died. He literally died as a consequence of Republican refusal to mask, to social distance for absolutely no reason. When they could, I think that rally, it was shown in the background photos that they put everybody in one tiny area and they had a whole stadium, but they decided to put everybody in front of the cameras so it looked like there was more people at the rally. And as a result, a bunch of people got COVID, and some of them literally died because Republicans put party over country. They put party over the lives of the American people. And I don't think that's a party I want. That's not a party I can trust. That's not a party I want to empower. And I think if you do something like that, if you get hundreds of thousands of Americans killed, you don't have a right to be in power anymore.
I think your COVID argument is like flawless, but the one thing is on the tax cuts. So do you have a source that like 90% of them will go to the 1% in 10 years, or?
Yeah, I mean, I remember I've read the figure several times from a bunch of different news media outlets. But Trump tax cuts go to the rich. Okay. This is from a Forbes article. Trump tax cuts help billionaires pay less in taxes than the working class in even 2018. Yeah, I mean, if you just gave it a Google, you can see how Trump's tax cuts have overwhelmingly benefited the rich and will continue to benefit the rich. Here, I have a graph here. Okay, I have a graph. I think there we go. All right, yeah. Let me just make sure it's. Here we go. So, all right. So we saw the rich, there we go, benefit overwhelmingly in the tax cut, even in 2020. So there you go.
All right, yeah. So I think you're done with that. Now let's go to how.
Awesome. So I've taken that, you liked my argument so far, that you've agreed with most of the points. You've seen at least the logic and the reasoning. I'm going to assume you're on board with destroying the Republican Party, as I explained. I think I just don't think that they have a right to exist, or it would be irresponsible to let the Republican Party to continue to exist for Democrats and for just the American people.
I think
I
we
would find
established
it.
that like now skeptics can ask how are we gonna do it? Like how
Yeah.
we dismantle it? Like what are we
Yeah.
gonna do now?
So
My first question is like you have people like DeSantis and Abbott who are gaining mass popularity due to like their sort of rhetoric and stuff. So how do you get rid of those people?
yes, so I think there should be a conceded effort to dismantle and attack conservative lines of thought, their rhetoric, to provide fact checking as has been done, but just more aggressive rebuttals that are available online for people to easily find. Because there's one thing that the Republican Party does super well is they get a couple people decide, okay, this is what we're going to be talking about. You saw this with CRT. Nobody was talking about CRT whatsoever. And then all of a sudden, everybody's talking about CRT. You have Trump talking about CRT. You have Charlie Kirk talking about CRT. You have PragerU talking about CRT. You have Fox News talking about CRT. And you have all these things around the country talking about CRT. And then you have all these people focused on CRT. This is a culture war issue. But all these talking points are coming down. And when you talk to Republicans, or if you talk to a lot of Republicans, you consume a lot of Republican media, you start to notice the same talking points. To put it in a term that some people from our generation might easily understand, they're like NPCs. They have dialogue trees. It's like if you say this, this happens. If you say that, this happens. If you say that, this happens. And that's through a large effort from and a lot of funding by the ultra rich, including some people like the Koch brothers. That's a lot of funding created and given to these large media organizations who are able to disseminate the same talking points. And they're strong talking points. These are talking points thought up by think tanks, and the left has nothing like it. We have small individual content creators. BreadTube is a fantastic place, but we don't have something like it. And we need funding from richer, Republicans always like to say like, oh, all of Hollywood supports the Democrats and stuff like that. So I would say some of those people in Hollywood, how about you step up? start donating, and we can make something like PragerU, except for the left, that are disseminating actual true points and counterpoints to Republican talking points, because that's a lot of what some people on the online left do. Vash and Hassan, they spend most of their day just taking apart conservative rhetoric and talking points. So I think something like that, and we have something a little bit similar, the Gravel Institute, fantastic type leftist copy, I guess, of PragerU, fantastic channel. But I think to respond to your thing, I think we need to put out real, true information and counterpoints to what Republicans have been saying, because for a long time in media, they have been not so challenged. It's sort of been, and this is a sort of a general problem I'm going to start hinting at, that liberals have not been very aggressive in defeating conservatism, because a lot of these richer, higher up liberals, for them, politics isn't that much of an issue, because no matter who's in who's in office and who's in control, they're going to continue to not have to pay that much in taxes. They're going to continue to have a bright economic future, and they're not the people who are really in danger. From these presidencies. And with Trump, you saw a lot of liberals wake up, because even though beforehand you had the same, Bush has been doing the same thing, and Republicans in Congress have been doing the same thing. Now with Trump becoming president, he was not so careful with his rhetoric. He was more overtly racist. And liberals started to see that and started to say, okay, we can't have somebody like this in office. It's really bad for our country. And they started to notice and pick up on that, because it seems like a lot of liberals at the top come from a place of privilege, and they're not as hardline, and they don't like to attack Republicans as much. So that's another thing that I'd like to say, is that the left and Democrats need to say, okay, they need to recognize, we have to stop Republicans. And if for anything else, if for any of the reasons, climate change. I think that's the biggest issue that we can all agree on as leftists and liberals, that climate change is an issue that needs to be tackled, and Republicans are in the way, and we need to move them out of the way, and we need to get seriously organized about that. So, Vikaas, I'm going to let you ask another question if you want to, or I can just continue.
Okay, I'm going to do my 2 counterpoints here.
Mm-hmm.
So, firstly, you said yourself, right? So, why would these Hollywood elites even back leftist thought, right? Like, leftist thought goes against them getting into power. So, why would they back it? And
Yes.
how? And if they don't back it, then who's going to do it for us? Like, they wouldn't back it, obviously. So, like, how do we do it then?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's the main, that's a huge issue, is that the liberals and the left don't agree right now, and the left really wants to take apart capitalist society, and liberals want to maintain it. We need to find some way to work around that, and I think leftists need to take the first step. And some members of the online left would not be happy with me saying this, but I think leftists have a responsibility to ally with the liberals against the GOP. I think that's just what we have to do. And I think we need to swallow some pills. And I think we're going to have to just get with it, because we have to stop climate change. We have to stop fascism. We saw this in Nazi Germany when the Soc Dems and the communists refused to ally against the Nazis took power. So I don't want to make a comparison that's unfair. I'm not trying to make a comparison between that situation and our situation. I don't think it's that far along. However, I'm using it as an example where the left refused to ally, and that's between the communists and the Soc Dems. I know it's a little bit different than the liberals and the Soc Dems, which is really what we're talking about.
All right, so question. So, like, I'm a social dem myself, but, like, thing is, right, so these liberals, they don't really want to join us, though. They're benefiting from, like, Republicans. Like, they're as economically like that as Republicans. So, and how will we get their elite support to do us? That's, like, my first question. And then,
Sure thing. Yep.
so can you give a quick answer, that I can ask the second question?
Yes. I think that that's one thing that we have to convince them of. We have to show liberals, and Trump gave us a great end. Trump gave us a great start at this. We can use Trump as an example. We can use January 6th as an example. And we can use rising global levels of inequality as an example. We have to get an in with liberals and impress upon them the severity of this issue. But I also think that there's only so much we can do, because liberals will ultimately want to secure more money for their donors, and you can't really go around that too much, unless there is really some sort of pressure and there's some sort of force saying you have to do it. You just have to. And that's where I think coming in with recruiting new young people to politics is the main strategy that the left should be pursuing. I think that's one of the most important things, is we recruit people now when they're young, because young people vote progressive by so much. Okay. And they're growing up in a world where all of the worst parts of capitalism, the worst parts of climate change, the worst parts of bigotry and racism have been very much impressed upon them. I think when you look at TikTok, when you see all these, like, you have like trigger warnings on stuff now everywhere on TikTok. You have a lot of people discussing things about their pronouns there in TikTok. You have text to speech so that people who are deaf or hard of hearing can read it. Okay. Sorry, you have the speech on the screen. And, I'm just using a TikTok as an example of young culture being very much committed to being inclusive. And that's the thing with young people. But the other thing with young people is that they don't vote. So I think we need to build a large party, not only by incorporating liberals, but also by incorporating people who are first-time voters, who are going to be progressive, who are the prime candidates for becoming leftists, in my opinion. And I think we can do both. I think the main focus, though, should be on young voters. That is our name, that sort of related. But I think we can do both. So I'm going to stop here because you asked for a quick answer, and I've already gone over.
So you discussed one end of the youth spectrums, but now like I'm going to do this, and this in the youth spectrum is specifically tied to one man, Ron DeSantis. So my concern is Ron DeSantis, right? He's that guy. He likes beers. He likes winning football, and like Tim Jones. He's like Nelk if it was a politician. I'm afraid that all DeSantis needs to do is legalize ganja and then get like a bunch of them influencer partiers, Nelk boys on, and then he's gonna win the election because he'll appeal to like guys our age, So how are you gonna stop DeSantis from like appealing to guys our age using like whatever influencer marketing tactics, or
Yeah.
like?
I think we just gotta hit them right back. I think if Republicans are gonna try and make conservatism cool, we do the same thing. We're gonna make leftism cool, because you know what? It is cooler. All right, young people, we don't like racism. Okay, we like progressivism. We like giving rights to our fellow men. Okay, and if we impress upon enough people that Republicans are doing the opposite of that, then I think we won. I think we just won. We need to make sure young people turn out, and we need to make sure young people know what's up politically, because there is a lot of efforts against us. And let me just take a moment to lay this out, because it's important to understand what we're up against. We are up against, as Vikaas has alluded to before, capital, the interest of capital. They don't want a broad left movement succeeding. They want the Republicans to stay in power. And there's a lot of Democrats who want the Republicans to stay in power, because that's their opposition force. Because if Republicans aren't in power, then all of a sudden Democrats are the most far right party, and now you're going to have a leftist party coming up through the roots. And there's a decent amount of Democrats who don't want that. They want the country to stay conservative. Even though they're labeled as Democrats, they're financially incentivized to make sure it remains conservative. So that's one thing we're up against. We're up against the interests of capital. Second thing, we're up against a country that is more conservative than a lot of other countries. We have a lot of little bit weird things going on in our country. The issue of guns is something that's not the same for a lot of other countries, that you can't compare us to the United Kingdom or Canada, where guns aren't that much of a political issue. Where here they're a huge political issue, and a lot of the country is a little bit more to the right on guns than you would expect when you look at other stuff. Another thing that we have to fight, and this goes into the interest of capital, but a large propaganda machine against leftist efforts and organization, where you've seen both conservative people in government and also the United States government itself, or maybe not so much that, but I'll walk that back. Just the Red Scare is still very much alive, calling Bernie Sanders a communist, was an argument to conservatives and some Democrats during the 2016 primary. That was literally just, oh, Bernie's you're communist. Roll done. Next person. That was the whole argument. And there's still the shadows of the Red Scare still remain in society, and they're deeply ingrained, and that's something that we do have to fight. And not because I want communism, but because the Red Scare is used to take anything, like healthcare, giving healthcare to people, affordable healthcare to people, affordable and effective healthcare to people, or housing or infrastructure, all these things that are fantastic, and yet you just call them communist, and that's the whole argument. Government doing stuff, communist. That is literally the argument of some conservatives and Democrats these days, and that's something that we have to fight against. So those are, I think, some of the main beasts, and I just want to lay that out because it's important to know what you're fighting for, but also what you're fighting against.
So yeah, next thing is, I guess we're definitely gonna be appealing more to the educated youth, but I guess we're going a little too formal and we're using so much formal language, like your idea of getting rights, like that is cool, right? But obviously some like frat boy who's like slamming White Claws isn't going to be appealed to that. Like, I think, how are we going to appeal to like those guys and even the rural working class who aren't like using our lingo? Like, how are you going to say like leftists don't like feds, and like how are we going to like relay that type of information, or leftists don't want to suck off the 1%? Like, how are you going to relay that information to them if we like use this
Yes.
big lingo?
Mass campaigns, campaigns focused on building grassroots campaigns, basically, is what the left has been adopting and taking. And I want to talk about this later, Vikaas, if you'll give me an opportunity. Not right now, but at some point later, I'd like to talk about how what Democrats need to do to win electorally. So I just want to talk about that a little bit later on.
Okay.
But the whole idea of building a broad tent movement, where it's forget the politics for a second, forget Democrats and leftists and conservatives and everything. And this is something Bernie Sanders, I think, did particularly well, was he was like, forget all the political mumbo jumbo. I want to help you. I'm going to give you healthcare. Your healthcare plan right now is terrible. Okay, if you even have one, all right, I'm going to give you better healthcare. All right, boom. Lots of people signed up for that. You had coal miners, conservative coal miners, signing up for that. You had and I believe there was some sort of strike by I think it was coal miners, and it was in 2017, and a bunch of leftists turned out, a bunch of I think a bunch of anarchists, or I was either anarchists or Antifa members, showed up and helped the coal miners support in strike. There was a strike, and they helped, and they had a protest in DC, and a bunch of leftists showed up in solidarity. And I think we need to build solidarity across the country. But I also caution against thinking that the working class is some white Appalachian man who is down in the coal mines, because the working class is beautifully diverse, and it is not just in the Midwest. It is in cities, and it is in fact overwhelmingly in cities. And the working class is not just white. It is brown. It is black. It is Asian, and it is also white. But I think we should dispel the myth of these people who have been voting conservatives, or are just not really or are politically checked out. Are just all the only people. Or I'm going to walk back the politically checked out statement, ignore that, but I would like to talk about that, so I'll expand on that. The people who are politically checked out, I think that Vikaas has been sort of referring to when he means these like frat boys who don't really care that much about politics. They don't care about politics because they haven't seen a candidate who has really worked for them, who has really promised them, and seemed genuine in those efforts. They haven't seen politics as something that can make their lives better. It's just been some sort of like scummy thing where all the politicians are corrupt, etc. And we need to show them that there's a better way. And Bernie did this so well. He got so many people who are not interested in politics politics, now on the front lines, fighting for something like Medicare for all, because it was something so bold that they hadn't heard, and it was refreshing language, especially to hear it from somebody who was so genuine. And we could tell Bernie was genuine because he's been saying all this stuff for so many years. I mean, there's those speeches that went viral on YouTube of Bernie Sanders yelling at I think it was a Republican or Democrat congressman for using the like words homos in a derogatory manner, and Bernie Sanders is there standing up for gay rights, and it's like the 70s. All right, he's been saying the same stuff. All right, no matter if it was politically advantageous or not, because he believed it was the right thing to do. And Americans have been missing that from politics. They have checked out, and I don't blame them, because politicians haven't shown them that they can make their lives better, and they haven't been interested in helping the working class and the poor and the downtrodden and the unfortunate, and the people who, and those are the people who don't vote. So I think that was sort of a point I wanted to make, and I'm glad I was.
That's fair. So, like, I think we can move on now. Like, what's your next argument?
Sure. So how the Democrats need to win electorally. Okay. I've sort of alluded to this, but here's the secret. The American population, when you're not talking about parties or political affiliations, when you're talking about it, really, when you get down to specific policies, leftist progressive policies are the most popular. When you talk about $15 minimum wage, when you talk about, maybe not so much now because of the conservative media push to vilify it, but before that whole thing happened, $15 minimum wage, that was super popular. Okay. Medicare, some sort of government, some sort of free and effective healthcare system not tied to your employer, extremely popular. Now, when you say it's the Democrats or Bernie Sanders proposing it, that approval rating drops. But extremely popular, 70, 80%. Weed legalization, 70, 80%, or 60, 70%. You had background checks among NRA members. Background checks, something that would stop as many gun purchases, universal background checks, and closing gun show loopholes, that was supported at 99% among 97% among NRA members, right? These are the people. The American people are much more progressive than the media would have you believe. And when you take out the politics behind it, when you just say, do you want your life to be better by having free healthcare? Do you want your life to be better by having better infrastructure? The American people have a resounding yes. Okay, appealing, as they did tried in 2016, appealing to the so-called moderate voter, the suburban housewife, the suburban couple, the young American white male, the so-called moderate Republicans, as what the Democrat is the Democratic strategy and what they have been pursuing. And I don't agree with that. I think, as I've said before, the young people who have never voted before are the main people we should be pursuing. We should be reassuring our minority base that we still care and we still want to fight for them, because that support is lacking. And we need to swing left. Okay, my point is, we need to swing left. We have to stop trying to beat the GOP at being more conservative than them. We're just not going to win that game. And if we try and be more conservative than the GOP, then there's no longer a point in being Democrats. We might as well just join the GOP. Okay, so we have to swing left, not only because it is the only way our party can go without compromising your own party values, but because it is the electorally popular thing to do. All right, we saw the DSA. They propped up the Democratic Socialists of America. For those not familiar, they endorsed, I think, 29 candidates, and 27 of them won in the 2020 elections. It was, across the board, up and down the ballot. I think a state representative was the second most, or the biggest person I think they got. It wasn't anybody huge, but up and down the ballot, when you have fair elections where there's not a bunch of corporate donations coming in at the last second, like Nina Turner's election, when you have a fair election where the people are really able to speak their mind, you see the left overwhelmingly win. And even when it's not a fair election, you see more progressive candidates beat out the, we're going to go with a moderate, safe chance. All right. Because here's another example, Joe Biden. All right. Now you're going to say to me, Joe Biden won. What are you talking about? I would say this: Joe Biden, if it wasn't for COVID and Trump's mishandling of it, Joe Biden would have lost. Okay, he barely won as is. All right, he barely won. I mean, it was a pretty good success, but as far as the votes, he did better in the electoral college than he did by the votes. He only won like by 4 million votes, I think, because if you could confirm that. So Joe Biden, he barely won, and I sincerely think if it wasn't for COVID, Joe Biden definitely would have lost. It was going to be a wrap. That was the main thing Democrats were able to attack Trump conservatives on aggressively. I don't know why that was the issue they chose. I mean, it was a great issue to choose. I'm not saying, uh, yeah, I wasn't trying to imply that COVID wasn't a good issue to choose. I'm just saying there was a lot of issues beforehand. Anyways, I'm getting off track here. Joe Biden only nearly won, and he won, I think, because of COVID, and he did start to spout out a lot of progressive language. Although there wasn't a lot of confidence behind it because people just didn't think Joe Biden was going to be progressive, and it's because he's not a progressive guy. But Democrats are sort of starting to see, but it should be up and down the ballot that they see. All right, we're going to be running left candidates because that's the electorally popular position. Okay, all these policies in Florida, at the same state Trump won, on the same ballot that Trump won, they gave a $15 minimum wage and they decriminalized weed. In Florida, or I think it was $15 minimum wage. Decriminalized weed was another state, but we saw a bunch of states who had on the ballot decriminalized weed. They passed it. Okay, and these were policies that Trump was running against, and Biden should have been running for, and leftists across the board should have been running for. So I think the left needs, and Democrats need to swing left to, if they really started wanting to win, if they actually want to win, they need to swing left because that's the electorally popular position among Americans. As long as you have the messaging down, and that Democrats aren't getting outflanked by more conservative Democrats with funding, not because their ideas are more popular, with funding. For those not familiar with Nina Turner race, there was a special election between two Democrats. It was a primary, and Nina Turner, who is a very progressive Democrat, she lost. I think due to her own blunders as well, not so much because she was a progressive, but some stuff she said, but also because there was a tremendous amount of funding being poured in by Republicans and establishment Democrats to her opponent. They massively outspent her, and as a result, Nina Turner lost just by being outspent. And that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, how you have the interest of capital in the ultra rich fighting against any sort of progressive movements.
And I mean, like, I'm done basically. Like, I don't have any more questions to ask on top of that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'll just talk for a couple more minutes, and I think we'll wrap it up there. So, and then, I think we're gonna skip audience questions for now, unless there's any. Just put them in the chat, guys. I don't think we're gonna include audience questions in the recording. We'll have them after the recording. So, and by the way, guys, if you're still here, if you want to watch these live, we announce them on our Instagram beforehand. So if you want to tune in next time and ask questions, feel free. You're welcome to follow our Instagram at The Young Voters. It'll also probably be in the description. So yeah. One final point I do want to make is, and you should watch my review of the book Untrumping America by Dan Pfeiffer. He talked a lot about what the Democratic Party needs to do to win. That's a great book to read. One thing that Democrats have not being really paying attention to is up and down ballot races. And what I mean by down ballot races is you have the presidential race, and then you have congressional seats for Senate, and then you have House of Representatives, and then you have state senates, and then state House of Representatives, and then down even lower to mayors and county officials and stuff like that. Republicans do a phenomenal job of pouring in money, and it's because they have more money, but they pour money all the way from the president to the city sheriff, the county sheriff, or judges and stuff like that. So they pour money for campaigns up and down the ballot. And Democrats, unfortunately, just because they don't have enough money, and because there's not a lot of political will. And there's another thing he talks in the book. He talks in the book about how there's not a year-round Democratic institution focused on making sure Democrats win. And the Republicans do have that, so they're not able to coordinate as well, but they're also not able to distribute funds to people who are running down the ballot. And this is something I've been looking into, and it's sort of a general problem among Democrats and the left. Although the left is a little bit better on this. Bernie Sanders just did a bunch of support for people running down the ballot. I'm part of his volunteer team, and I'm getting emails and messages about donating to people down the ballot and helping volunteer for them. So, anyways, sorry, not to go. My point is basically is that Democrats have ignored state and local governments. And state and local governments right now, Republicans are absolutely dominating. And as a result, they're passing a bunch of laws that we don't want. All these voting restriction laws that are being passed, these and anti-CRT patriotic education laws, those are happening at the state level. Even though we control the federal government, at the state level, Republicans are still killing it. And literally and figuratively, are still killing it. And we need to make sure we maintain control of both the House, Senate, presidency, Supreme Court, and lower courts, and lower level government. So that's another thing that we need to focus on. My final point is, unless Vikaas, you have anything to add right now?
No, I'm good. You
okay.
did it all, man.
Yeah. My final point is that we need to see Democrats, we need to see them more united, as I've talked about before. So I'm just trying to regain my train of thought. I derailed it for a second and I lost it. We need to see Democrats campaigning to win, okay? Because a lot of, like, the slogan has been, I think Michelle Obama started it, they go low, we go high, referring to when Republicans do something stupid, we take the morally superior ground. Now, that sounds great in principle, but when taking the morally superior ground, for example, when Republicans said to Obama, when the Supreme Court justice passed away, or I think it was retired. Was it retired or passed away in the case of Obama? You remember, Vikaas?
Sorry, which one was it?
The Supreme Court justice that either passed away or retired during Obama's term, a year out before his election.
It's Scalia, right?
Scalia, yeah, Scalia. But did he retire? Or did he pass away?
Passed away, and like the Republican, and even Obama wanted to appoint a Republican judge. Like he wanted to appoint Merrick Garland, but even then a Republican said no, it's too late.
Yes. So,
but then Trump did something with like Amy Coney Barrett, and
exactly. Exactly. When Justice Scalia passed away, Republicans said, no, you can't. Obama can't nominate another guy because it's a lame duck presidency year. And this was complete crap. They just pulled it out of their butts because they wanted to make sure they were able to nominate the next Supreme Court justice. And they literally point blank refused to nominate anybody without even knowing the person. Like Vikaas said, Obama brought up moderates. He brought up even conservatives. And they said, no, we're not going to appoint whoever Obama chooses, no matter who it is. And this was clearly in violation of their oath to maintain the government and make sure it runs smoothly and fulfill their duties. And yet Democrats said, all right, then, if this happens again, we're going to hold you to it. This is the new precedent that we're setting. And guess what? Justice Ruth Ginsburg passed away, sadly. And then what did Republicans say? It's literally months before the election at this point. Trump is well past his lame duck presidency portion, and they nominate ACB in like 4 days. Or maybe it's not 4 days. Maybe it's like a week and a half. But they slammed through they nominated her. It got her in office before at blister, mind-numbing speed. And Democrats the whole time were like, you guys, you told us that we would, or we set this precedent when we were in power, and now you're just ignoring it. And what did they do about it? They just finger wagged and let them do it anyways. All right. And this is the you go low, we go high. They stick to the procedure. They stick to being, principled, and they scoff. They just scoff and say, well, I really don't think you should be doing this, but they don't take any action. They refuse to ever use the abilities afforded to them by the Constitution. They refuse to wield political power in a way that would actually that because they're scared of being called authoritarian. They're scared of being called power hungry. But here's the thing. Republicans do it anyways. They always say that Biden passed a bunch of executive orders. They were phenomenal executive orders at the start. He undid Trump's presidency and started passing really good executive orders in his first couple of days in office. And all the Republicans were like, "Oh, well, Biden's ruling through executive orders only, et cetera, et cetera." They're refusing to abolish the filibuster because, well, there's some tactical things worried about that, but they're refusing to do so many things because they think it's going to look bad politically, and they think it's not taking the moral high ground, and they're not this is not the way politics should be run. But here's the thing, man. When the world's on fire and wealth inequality is skyrocketing and racial violence is going up and discrimination and education has no funding, and we're in the next pandemic, and people are just being encouraged to die by your local politician to the pandemic because it's not that big of a deal. When all this is happening and the world's gone terribly wrong, are we really going to be happy with the fact that Democrats stuck to their principles, whatever that means, and didn't fight hard enough for the American people? Are we really going to be happy with that? Look, this may sound a little out there to some people, but I think it's high time that Democrats start wielding their political power in a serious way. Right? I'm not suggesting they break the law. I'm not suggesting they bend the rules. I'm suggesting they simply use the things afforded to them and be a little bolder and try a little harder, because Republicans are certainly trying. They're using everything to their advantage. Not only that, they're breaking a ton of rules. I'm not suggesting we break a ton of rules, but look at the amount of electoral success Republicans have had in recent years by simply not caring. And I'm not suggesting we do the same as them. What I'm suggesting, we kind of look at what they're doing to succeed and start to emulate some of that, because some of that is perfectly legal and perfectly moral. And what are they doing it for? They're doing it to give tax cuts to the rich and to do racism. All right. Those are not noble goals. Those are not things they can justify. All right. Meanwhile, you have the Democratic Party, at least they say, and I think they should be against racism, and I think they are at some measure. But they could be more aggressive with it. They're against wealth inequality, and they want to build a better future for American people. And they saw these things, and you know what? They have good goals, they have good morals, and they have good reasons. And I think just the Republicans don't. And that's the main thing I would say to people who are concerned. We can't do the same as them because then we'll be on their level. And I'm not suggesting we get exactly on their level, but I'm saying we should start taking a serious interest in being a little bit more politically savvy, because the Republicans are incredibly politically savvy, and I think Democrats are just not, because they're too scared to wield power. And look, we have to do something at this point. We really do. Climate change is such a big issue, and the just basically I'm running over the justifications I did at the start, and we really have to deal with it. And the satisfaction that we get comparatively to having quote unquote done the right thing, because I don't think it's the right thing to stand by and let ACB be replaced and not even fight for it, when the precedent was established earlier that you can't appoint somebody during lame duck session. That would be an example of Democrats, abiding by the system, even though they're not even following the rules that they made earlier. So I just think Democrats need to be a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more politically savvy, and they've refused to do so far. And I think that's one of the main things. I think that's one of the two main takeaways, is that we need to swing left in our campaigning to pick up new voters who haven't voted yet, and we need to start, once we're in power, we need to actually start wielding that power, because Republicans have been able to do so much even while they're in a minority in government, and we're a majority in government right now. Think about what if we had a super majority even, and imagine the amount we could do, the good we could do if we wielded power properly. So, Vikaas, if you have any questions for me.
No, I'm good. I think we've wrapped it up. So like, do you have any final statements, Nico, or should I like close it off?
No, I think that was my final statement. I've said some things that I might walk back when I rewatch this. But in general, I think I would like to open up the discussion about moving further politically, especially with my last point about being politically savvy and sort of doing what the Republicans are doing. And I would like to open up discussion, sort of think in your head, how far can Democrats go, or do you even agree with me? Do you think the GOP should be dismantled, or do you think like we should just continue to let it exist? I mean, I'm not saying we like start executing, members of the GOP or something, or like writing in laws that say like the GOP can no longer be in power. I'm saying we do it all legally. We convince voters. We do all of that. I'm just saying we should really get serious about getting rid of the GOP and making it politically irrelevant. And I don't think we have been getting serious so far. So I'm definitely not saying we break any laws, and I'm definitely not saying we start getting rid. I mean, like getting rid. You know what I'm saying, of GOP politicians. Although I'm sure they would. No, I'm not going to say that. But I'm totally not suggesting that. I'm saying we do it legally. I'm saying we do it. We convince enough people to vote for us by. Sorry, the chat's going off a little bit, saying some funny stuff, which I won't repeat on video. I lost my train of thought there. We do it all legally. We convince voters, but we just get a little bit more serious about politics as Democrats, because there is a lot riding on this in the future. And I don't think I just don't think the best case scenario future is one that includes the Republican Party as something that is continuing to exist. So with that, thank you for watching. If you watched the whole way through, I think this was one of my more important videos, and Vikaas, I appreciate you asking all these great questions. I appreciate the audience, the live audience, for watching through. Like I said before, on our Instagram, we post stuff like this. We have a bunch of links in the description if you want to check them out. I think our Discord, our Twitter. We don't even use our Twitter. We have our website, obviously, and you're already on our YouTube. I think that's all we have in the description. But check out our website. Check out my videos. Check out Vikaas's videos. Or do you have? Yeah, you have videos. And Vikaas's articles. What else should I tell them to check out?
Yeah, and also like tell everyone to subscribe. Tell your auntie subscribe. Tell your uncle subscribe. Tell your neighbors subscribe. Tell your enemies subscribe. Your ops, if you're like into that scene, and tell anyone subscribe. Like you don't have to like them, but just get us the money.
Yeah, everybody subscribe. I think we just hit 50 subscribers today, Vikaas.
I think 40. We're trying to hit
40. Okay, yeah, we hit 40 we hit 40 subscribers today. That's kind of sick.
Please get us to 50. Like,
yeah.
Well, thank you for it.
Yeah, follow our Instagram too. We're at like 230 followers. It'd be safe if we got to 250.
Let's try to get us 50 on the YouTube and 250 on the Instagram, and
yeah, 50-50.
That'll be nice.
50-50. Yeah, I think, and then like the video if you liked it. God bless you if you've gone to the end of this and watched the whole way through. So yeah, I don't want to ramble on because unless you have any final remarks, I'm about to end the recording here.
No, but like, yeah, just thanks for sticking around, and we're gonna post some like more fun videos soon. Like if politicking is not really on, like we got like a few videos. One of our guys, Greek boy, he's in Alaska now. He's gonna post an Alaska vlog. So if you're into that type of stuff, just like follow along, and you can soon watch his Alaska vlog. So thanks for sticking around.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, because. But all right, thank you everybody. Thank you for watching, and have a nice night, or wherever you are. Nice day, nice night, nice morning,
afternoon.
Yeah, I think that covers all of them. All right, goodbye.